Thanks, everybody. All right. So, good afternoon, folks. Good afternoon, Nazareth Village. My name is Yosef. I'm going to be your local guide for the next hour or so. And together we're going to see how first century life was like in Nazareth back in Jesus' time. So, during the tour, feel free to take pictures, ask questions if you have any. If any of the pictures are things you want to use later for commercial purposes, just don't forget to sign a release form at the end of the tour in the office. It's private use, Facebook, Instagram, social networks. Don't worry about it. We actually love typing pictures. Just a few words about the village. We are a non-profit organization. We're part of a bigger Christian non-profit called the Nazareth Trust, which is based in Scotland, in Edinburgh. And yes? So about 160 years ago, when life expectancy here in Nazareth and the region during the Ottoman time was about 22 years, this is when they sent a team of doctors with a purpose to improve the quality of life. This is something they successfully accomplished, and for almost 160 years they've been providing health care. But not only that, they also preserved this piece of land very carefully. And that's the reason why we can see the only remaining word farm from the time of Jesus here in Nazareth. So I hope you're excited.
Yeah.
So how many days have you been traveling so far?
Saturday, this is 3.
Okay, well,
3 tour days, 2 traveling.
well, I have a question. Can anything good come from Nazareth?
Yes.
You know, this is a town that's not mentioned even once in the Old Testament. And when it is mentioned for the first time, not in a very positive light. Remember, it's the same question Nathaniel asked Philip. But today we're going to follow Philip's advice, because he told Nathaniel, come, see. And I'm really glad that you came to see Nazareth. In the Gospel, Nazareth is mentioned for 2 very important events, and one of them portrayed here. You remember Angel Gabriel, who appeared to a Jewish virgin named Mary to tell her she will have a son. You call him?
Yeshua.
Emmanuel. Jesus. This is where Jesus spent most of his life growing up. Around the age of 30, it's recorded that he was standing in the synagogue in Nazareth reading from the scroll of the prophet Isaiah. We're going to talk about this story later on. But traveling through Israel today, people get to see quite a lot of pictures like these. I'm sure during your travel, did you get to see some dead stones? I'm sure you get to see a whole lot more. And it's exciting to be where history took place. Today, though, we're going to see the living stones. We're going to walk through a farm and village to see where people live, how they dressed, what kind of seasonal work they were doing, interact with the villagers. And all the houses we have reconstructed, we also use the same natural building materials that they would use in the first century as well. So you won't have to imagine how things were like. We actually see full-size replicas of buildings along with what we found. And just to show you, the center of the town is right here with this large Catholic Church of Annunciation in the middle. And underneath the church and in the vicinity is where archaeologists found houses from the first century and a ritual bath of purification, a mikveh. So what does that tell us? Jewish towns, right? So we're located about 20 minutes walk from there. That's the Scottish hospital I was talking about, and the Nazareth village underneath here. In 1995, when the project began, I want to show you what archaeologists from the Holy Land University, led by Stephen Fan, found here on site.
Whoa.
No, we didn't find sandals.
Wow.
But did you see here? This is we'll see it later on, but this is a wine press, an authentic one. This is probably the jewel of the Nazareth village because it helped us to understand the story behind the piece of land. So this would have been the vineyard. And finding a wine press means that a vineyard had to be somewhere close by because it wouldn't be convenient to carry your grapes from the vineyard 15-20 minutes walk back to the city. Okay. So some of the grapes would be lost along the way, that shake them up, so it just would not be convenient. And as they expanded the dig, that's exactly what they found. They found the proof, terraces. So you can see here, this is what a terrace would look like, and they would usually find them with different layers of soil. So there's fertile soil on the top and bottom, and there's this white chalky sealant in between, which was there to simply keep the terraces intact so they're not washed away during the rainy season, and that provides drainage and self-irrigation. And about 1 dunham of a piece of land like this, it took a family about a year to develop. So you can imagine this is prime real estate, very expensive piece of land. And we remember the parable where the king called the people to a feast, and one of the people said, I've just bought a piece of land. Now you need to go and see it. Can you imagine yourself buying something that's worth 1 year of work and not taking a look? It was an insult to the king, and he said that's why go call everybody else. Many are called, but few are chosen. Also, on site we found watchtowers that were used for protection from thieves, wild animals, and temporary storage. Water channels for irrigation were chiseled to the bedrock and an ancient stone quarry. So things pointing to the fact that this would have been a first century agricultural farm. And this is what we're going to see outside. But for now, let's step right through here. Remember, Jesus said once, he said, enter through the narrow gate. Well, narrow is the gate, and the path that leads to life. But here we're the ones who find it. So we found it. You ready? Let's go. All right. Come on in.
You can go first.
If you want, we can also use the wider gate. Just to fit everybody in. Come on, everybody.
No, we want to go through the narrow gate.
Yeah.
The narrow one. So, of course, this gate is not from the first century, but what it is a very good reminder of the words of Jesus. It's possibly would be referring to a very similar door of the gate.
Uh-oh.
Executive decision.
Folks, if you look at that, on the very top here, you can see this is a model of the first century Nazareth, which was a really small town built here in Galilee, and slowly expanded. And actually, Nazareth was a very large town of slightly over 80,000 people. About 2/3 of the population are Arab Muslim, about 1/3 are Arab Christian, and Upper Nazareth, which is the Jewish part of town, slightly more elevated, numbers over 40,000. This is Nazareth today. And what about first century Nazareth? How did it come to be? And just looking at the map of the Holy Land, you can see how small, how tiny it is. Notice over 2,000 years how many empires were here. And even before the Romans, you had the Assyrians, the Persians, Babylonians, and the Greeks here as well. And it's really because of the very strategic location of the Holy Land. So all the international trade routes pass right through here using this natural bridge. And they call this way the Via Maris, the way of the sea. And this means any empire controlling this piece of land could easily control the world economy and influence politics, information, and religion. Now, before the Romans, during the Hellenistic period when the Greeks were here, you see that the Greeks started forcing Jewish people to worship their gods. They set up the statue of Zeus in the temple. They even made sacrifices on the altar in the temple of Jerusalem. And this defiled the temple caused the historical event known as the Maccabean Revolt, dating to about 167 years before Christ. Now, during the revolt, 8 battles took place in the Holy Land. And one of those battles is called the Battle of Beit Tzor. It's the outskirts of Bethlehem. Now, we don't have a lot of information from that time period, but one of the assumptions that scholars make is possible because of the battle, many people were forced to leave their home and resettle into different peaceful, quiet places like the Galilee. It's possible that some of those families and people from the Beit Tzor and the surrounding area of Bethlehem were the ones that resettled, making Nazareth their new home. And they called it in Hebrew Nazareth. Can you say Nazareth?
Nazareth.
And the root word is Netzel. Can you say Netzel?
Netzel.
Netzel means new shoot. That's an interesting name, right? Remember, Prophet Isaiah in chapter 11, verse 1 says the Messiah will be like a new shoot from the stump of Jesse. And reading the Gospel of Matthew and Luke, you know Jesus is the son of David. He was the ancestor. David, the son of Jesse. know Jesus also was born in Bethlehem of Judea. And that's exactly what the prophet Micah had foretold in chapter 5, verse 2, about the birthplace of the Messiah. Remember the story of Nativity, and then how Herod the Great wanted to put away with the Messiah by killing all male infants up to 2 years of age. And the angel boy born Joseph, so they fled from Bethlehem to Egypt. And after Herod died, it says they safely returned back to the Galilee. So they came back to Nazareth. This is where Jesus spent most of his life growing up. Isn't it interesting? Out of all places, this is where he grew up. Did something good come from Nazareth?
Yes.
Yeah. Remember, this is Matthew, chapter 2, verse 23, saying that this way the prophecy about the Messiah was fulfilled, and he will be called Nazarene. Nazarene he was, right? This is how we know Jesus from the Bible, Jesus of Nazareth. And as you're passing by, you can notice some of these pictures are drawn by pilgrims from the Ottoman period, and here Nazareth looks very peaceful, very quiet, but it wasn't always this way. We know Nazareth has been completely destroyed several times throughout the 2,000 years history. So right now, we want to step through this Roman gate into the Roman time. Oh, you want to take some pictures here?
Yeah.
Okay. How's that?
Thank you.
Okay. Come on in. Watch your head if you've been gifted.
I love the Roman soldier.
Folks, do you have any questions?
I have one of those.
I get the point.
This is a replica of a Roman sword called the gladius. So Roman soldiers would usually have two swords, a longer one, and this one for close range combat. And anything that stands out about it?
Two sides,
Yeah.
two edges.
This is double-edged sword. And we remember that the writer of the letter to the Hebrews, this is a letter written during the Roman period, in chapter 4, verse 12, he's saying that the word of God is sharper than a two-edged sword. So this is something Roman soldiers would carry with them. Gladiators would use these in the arena. And you can see here, this is a replica of a Roman soldier. They were professionally trained and serving in the army for extensive periods of time. And the body armor the soldier would carry going to battle could easily weigh from 40 to sometimes 80 pounds. Wow. It's quite heavy. And in his letter to the Ephesians in chapter 6, Paul writes about putting on armor. He says, put on the helmet of salvation. Take up this breastplate of righteousness.
Yes.
See the belt?
Yes.
Gird yourself with a belt of truth. But above all, take the shield of faith.
And the
Take
sword of the Spirit.
And be ready to go preach the gospel of peace. So we can see where Paul gets all this imagery from, since he was a Roman citizen here.
He's barefooted.
The Romans were here for 367 years. Initially, they were called here because there was instability in the land. So they're supposed to bring the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome here, establish peace and stability. Stayed for quite a long time. And the way that they would achieve this was through oppressing the local population, taxing people heavily. And you can see this is how Romans were putting away with rebels, criminals, or thieves, or anybody who disrupted the peace of Rome. And I know in movies they usually show crosses much bigger than this one, right? Very cliche, very tall. In real life, though, we believe the crosses were smaller, so maybe something like this, at the eye level of people passing by, because the whole idea of crucifixion was to do it in a very public location, so main roads to or from the city where people could see this. As you're passing by, as opposed to something where the person is so high up, you don't really get to see or feel what they're going through. But when it's almost in your face, it's right on the side of the road, I'm pretty sure seeing something like this would stay with you in your memory for the rest of your life. This would be a lesson that if you rebelled against Rome, that's how you would end up. And nobody would want to die like this, because it's probably the most terrible, most humiliating way to die. Again, in movies, they would usually show somebody covered up with something, but in real life, a person was stripped of everything. You were nailed to the cross through the wrists and feet, and as your body weight is pulling you down, it's nearly impossible to breathe, so a person would have to do pull-ups for every single breath. And so within 12 to 24 hours, what happens is your lungs begin to swell up, expand, and collect liquids up to a point of asphyxiation. So simply not choking on your own liquids and a massive heart attack. Now, the Romans did not invent this, the Persians did, but they perfected the crucifixion. If you notice this little seat underneath the horizontal V, you see it? They call this the seat of mercy, and this allowed a person to sit down and breathe easier, but you can imagine that this extended their death and suffering by several days.
Mercy
And
seat.
as we read about the crucifixion of Jesus, it says that as he was crucified, the religious leaders came to the Romans asking permission to take everybody off the cross and to break their legs so they can die faster. And we read that it was a day of preparation, so people were preparing for the Passover. This is what it was leading to. Now when a holiday comes in, it's like a Sabbath, right? No work to be done. So fearing the law, that's why they came to the authorities, to the Romans. Because we're reading the law of Moses, God clearly said that cursed is the man who is hung on a tree. But he said that you will not leave the dead body on the tree overnight, but you have to bury them so the land will not be cursed. So they had to do the burial, they had to give them a quick death, and what the soldiers would usually do is break their legs. Now, is that what happened to Jesus? No. Remember, it says when the soldiers came, they saw him, he was already dead. They didn't need to break his legs, but so the soldier pierced his side. And see, John is telling us two prophecies, important ones, were fulfilled, that they will look upon him whom they have pierced, and he didn't break any of his bones. Remember, this is exactly what David in Psalm 34 said, that none of the bones in the body of the righteous one will not be crushed, and God will preserve him. So this is the Roman political way of execution, and we know that according to the law of Moses, the death punishment for any criminal activity or religious crime would be by the means of stoning. And we also remember when Jesus was in the synagogue in Nazareth on the Sabbath day, it says that as he was teaching, at the very end, everybody was so angry at him that he was thrown out and taken to a cliff where the city was built. It says they were planning to push him off the cliff and kill him. This probably would imply that they would push him off head first, and if he wouldn't die, they would have thrown stones to finish the job. And this is quite an unusual story that they would do something like that without hearing or judgment, but in the spur of the moment. We're going to get back to this story later on as we visit that first century synagogue replica. But right now, as Philip told Nathaniel, I want to invite you to come see. So right this way. Should I leave the lights on? Anybody want to take pictures?
Yes.
Oh, right this way.
The mercy seat. There's the mercy seat.
I'm sorry.
I said, there's the mercy seat.
I'm up in the front range.
It's the one in the middle there.
That's where I wanted to get a better picture.
Excuse me. Huh?
Oh.
I'm over your head.
Recording.
Yeah, I'm way over your head.
Which way did we go?
They went that way.
This way?
Somewhere.
Did they go this way? Uh-huh. They did. And there was light.
Put it in low gear. There's the back of the YMCA. I'm sorry. for fighter jets, so I guess they're invisible fighter jets. Oh, this is lunch. I think this is lunch. Yeah, I'll follow you. Fine as a seat, baby.
Big, so maybe it won't matter.